Welcome to the Sober Living Stories podcast. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of sobriety. We shine a spotlight on individuals who have faced the challenges of alcoholism and addiction and are today living out their best lives sober. Each guest has experienced incredible transformation and are here to share their story with you. I'm Jessica Stepanovic, your host. Join me each week as guests from all walks of life share their stories to inspire and provide hope to those who need it most. Hi, and welcome to the Sober Living Stories podcast. This morning, I have the pleasure of sitting down with our first featured author, Lisa May Bennett. She wrote My Unfurling, Emerging from the Grip of Anxiety, Self-Doubt, and Drinking. She is here today to share how making a decision to become alcohol-free has positively affected her life. With a passion for writing since the age of 11, she published her first book at 56, Becoming a Power of Example, that accomplishing your dreams is sometimes one decision away. So welcome, Lisa, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be your first author guest.
Yes, and I've been following you on social media and your Instagram for quite a while, so I'm so happy to have you here. You know, you write in your memoir about early childhood memories and your family dynamics, and you describe a lot about how that shaped you. Can you just take us through your story? I admire you as a writer. I think you have an incredible book out. I encourage our listeners to just lean in and hear what you have to say. I think you have a powerful message.
Well, thanks. It was important to me when I wrote my book that I look back at my past and try to figure out what had set me up for leaning so heavily on alcohol, why I was attracted to it in the first place, and why it became so ingrained in my life. So I looked back at my childhood. I even looked back a little bit at my mother's childhood. And I was raised by a single mom. I was a late bloomer myself. So I was a really shy kid. I was uncomfortable talking to strangers. I often felt less than my own friends. And so I was really insecure, and I had a lot of anxiety. My mother has also suffered from depression and anxiety. It was sometimes hard trying to help regulate my mother's emotions in addition to my own as I was growing up. So by the time everyone started drinking in high school, around the age of 16, I already felt kind of behind my friends as far as my relationships with boys. And I was really still nervous to talk to boys. And so everyone had started going to parties, and it just seemed like the natural thing to have a drink and relax and build that liquid courage. And so I very much took to it right away. And, I was pretty small then, so I got drunk really easily, and it just sort of set a pattern. Once I got to college, I've described college as an Olympic training ground for drinking. Partying became more of my major than creative writing was. And I really didn't set myself up for the writing career that I wanted. So by the time I left college, my drinking was a pretty ingrained habit, and I leaned on it for good things, to celebrate and to have fun with friends and connect with people. I leaned on it when I was bored or when I was stressed out, and it became this sort of like all-purpose mood enhancer. And I think a lot of people will relate to that. And it's the way it's sold to us in society. So it's kind of not a surprise that we would all come to rely on it for so many different things. And so, I went on for decades drinking quite enthusiastically. I was never an everyday drinker, and I was rarely a day drinker, but when I did start drinking, it was very difficult for me to stop. And I started questioning my relationship with alcohol pretty early on, but because I could always compare myself to someone worse off, I didn't think I needed to quit. So it took decades. So and I think a lot of people can relate to this. I tried moderating. I wasn't very good at moderating. Every once in a while I could, but it literally took decades for me to finally realize that even though I hadn't hit any kind of what we traditionally think of as a rock bottom, the alcohol was getting in the way of doing things that I wanted to do. And that was when I finally decided 6.5 years ago that it was time. It was time to get the alcohol out of the way and see if maybe I could finally build this writing career that I had dreamed of for so long.
Yes, yes. It's like, they talk about a lot in recovery or 12-step recovery, how important it is not to compare, but to find similarities, because you can always just compare yourself out, and sometimes that could really delay, you coming to your own decision or the individual coming to their own decision that, yes, this is a problem for me, so you've really pinpointed something that happens often.
Yeah.
And the delay in writing career, and then once putting it down, what happens next, everything.
Right. And I, had sort of made a promise to myself. I was 51 by the time I quit. And I just said to myself, okay, so if you're going to quit because of your writing, you've got to do something about it right away. And so I did. I took a writing course, a 6-month long writing course that I started only a couple months into sobriety. And I kept that promise to myself. And I actually started my book back then. But at the end of those 6 months, I had a really good book proposal, but I decided to put it on the shelf and sort of go about, I didn't have my sea legs in sobriety yet. And I really needed to work on that before I could go out and first finish a book and then go out and actually stand behind it and promote it. So it took me a couple more years before I could come back to it and finish it.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that was a real honest move. Like, you wanted to have the knowledge, have the information so that you can stand on what words you put down. Yeah. So that was honest and for your readers,
Yeah, because there was the part of me that was like, okay, I'm not getting any younger. I've got to do this right away. But I knew that I need some more true organic confidence, because like I said, I had been using alcohol for confidence for so long, and I needed the time to build some real confidence before I could bring my book out into the world.
I like how you put alcohol down and then you immediately enrolled. So it was kind of like a replacement in a sense, but such a positive creative outlet that you immediately enrolled in what you wanted to get started on right away. And that's a smart move because, we have that where we put it down and what are we going to fill our day with? What are we going to fill the time that we were drinking with? And I find that it easily fills up, and it fills up with the good stuff, the stuff that has meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other promises I had made to myself was that I would try some new things. I had always wanted to try Pilates, and I had always wanted to try aerial yoga. And so I had this sort of long bucket list of things that I wanted to do, a lot of physical things that, when you're recovering from a hangover, you're often not up for doing those things.
Heading out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember, I can relate to that a lot. Someone had asked me to go to a Denver Broncos game, and I thought, well, I don't really get into that, but I'd never tried to do something like that sober. And so I went, and what an incredible fun time, and so many times that happened. I would have to sit and be like, well, I didn't like that then, but that doesn't mean I don't like it sober. And my whole world opened up, things that I thought I didn't like, I loved. So that's a good point.
Yeah. And then there were other things that I'm like, maybe I didn't like this as much as I thought I did because I was drinking during
Right,
it.
the flip.
One of those things, I'm sorry to say, is cooking. Oh my gosh. I loved cooking for so long, and I still like it. But not as much. Like, I used to do these marathon cooking sessions every Sunday. I was in the kitchen cooking, but I was drinking wine. And yeah, I've discovered that, at least for me, cooking is not quite as fun without like several glasses of wine.
Yes, yes. It had that negative connotation to it, and I spoke with someone once about that because I too, my family was of, hey, 4 o'clock is appetizers, and then 5 o'clock we're doing wine, and then we're cooking,
Yeah.
whether it was songs or, especially in early sobriety, the music, the playlist, it's connected.
One of the other things I struggled with was my husband and I used to love making a fire outside in the evenings, like not in the heat of summer, but like right before, like between summer and fall, when it's like the perfect weather to sit outside and have a fire. And I realized that first year that I had come to associate that with drinking and how hard it was. It took me like a couple, probably not until like my third year of sobriety to be able to sit at that fire and enjoy myself without a glass of wine.
Through putting down alcohol, you kind of came to who you are now, and then how that turned into a memoir for you.
I started writing at a very young age. I think you mentioned in the opening, I from around about the age of 11 or 12 that like, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to be a writer. And so I just expected that that's what I was going to do. And, I was a pretty hard worker at school. I usually got really good grades. I didn't have a hard time getting into college and getting some scholarship money. And so like in like that career was going to happen. But at the same time, there was this side of me that was incredibly insecure. And I was always worried about saying or doing the wrong thing. I was, almost paranoid of like somehow revealing to people and to myself that I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. And so, yeah, I had all these fears that people could see through me, that I was, I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. I wasn't a good person. And so it was hard to sort of go into college and say, okay, I'm going to write for the newspaper. I'm going to write for the literary magazine. I'm going to do all these things I need to do to set myself up for a future as an author, which is what I wanted. And it was just so much easier to just drink and have fun and cut loose. But at the same time that I was doing that, and this is something that like, or at least I didn't realize at the time, but like every time I drank, and I drank more than I wanted to, then I spent hours regretting it and questioning myself. And why do I keep doing this? And that was like eating away at the confidence that I did have. So not only was I sort of not doing things that would help build confidence, but I was undermining it every time I would drink and go crazy and pass out or black out.
Right.
So it was just this sort of catch-22 of, well, I want to relax. I want to stop. Like, my mind is kind of always going, and often, my brain is quite critical. I have that inner critic is very much alive in there. And I just wanted to shut it down sometimes. But the drinking, while it works in the short term, in the long term, it's not, it wasn't doing me any favors. And as I wrote the book, I was able to look back and I was able to see that me that was strong and curious and ambitious was in there, and that she was trying to get out. And I could see these things that I would do that were scary things. And I was writing them. I was like, oh, I'm kind of proud of young Lisa that she did that. But it wasn't quite enough. So she's in there, confident, strong Lisa was in there struggling to get out. And I could see that when I got it all down in the book. But the process of writing the book was also a huge confidence builder. So I think of myself as a work in progress. I'm very much a work in progress. I'm still building a lot of the emotional maturity that kind of got pushed aside through decades of drinking. So I'm building that, and I'm building that confidence that I need to keep trying more and more things.
So how you say were the big things about putting down alcohol and writing this memoir that helped you get to that point that you thought, I am strong, curious, and capable?
So, well, one thing I did for myself when I finally decided the second time to sit down and actually like write this book, I let myself just sit down almost like I was journaling and write about whatever topic I wanted to write. I didn't have an outline. I had like a list of things I knew I wanted to address, but I didn't have anything resembling a structure. And so I sat down. And so that was very healing, just being able to like just get it out onto the page. And then, interestingly enough, the editing process was hugely helpful because at the end, I had all these disparate chapters that were in no discernible order. And I had to sit there and find a structure for them and figure out how to make them flow. And in the process of doing that, I found some new confidence that I was actually pretty good at doing something like that. And sort of seeing my life take shape and start to make sense as a book helped it start to make sense, in general to me. The book in total went through 8 or 9 edits. Yeah. Some of them were just me. Some of them were, I had beta readers look at it and I was incorporating their feedback. I had a developmental editor look at it and I was incorporating her feedback. But it was a lot of hard work. And I did self-publish. So I also had to learn how to do all of that. And all of this it was kind of like having another job. And a lot of the work, it appealed to me. A lot of it was similar to some things that I have done in jobs previously. But a lot of it wasn't. And I was learning a lot of new things. And that helped me build additional confidence. I actually encourage anyone who has any kind of an inkling that they have a story that they want to share with the world to just get started getting it down. It's really, it's a healing experience. And then later on, it's a confidence building experience. I've heard from folks who say that even if drinking sort of wasn't their major obstacle in life, that they found that the book was very relatable to whatever it was that
Sure.
felt was getting in their way, whether it's, an eating disorder or spending. I had an experience recently where I was selling my book about a year ago at an event, and a woman had come by and we ended up friending each other on Instagram. And I heard almost a year later that she had gotten sober. And while I don't think I was like the reason she got sober, I think that it might have just been one of many seeds, that had been planted in her that eventually led her to do that. So it's one of the reasons why I encourage people to get out there and share stories with the world, because you just never know. You could planting seeds all over the place.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, virtually. And I'm very impressed with the amount of alcohol-free, and so I had not known it was so huge and is impacting so many people worldwide. And so I was really encouraged by that to create my own platform to do this, because I think it's so important. And, as we're talking about, that like that one woman, and it's a relationship, and you just never know. And just to sidebar a little bit more about your book, you do really talk extensively about your relationship with your mother. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And have you seen, since childhood to now and becoming alcohol free, how has the challenges and the dynamics of that relationship changed positively since you stopped drinking?
So yeah, I have a fairly complicated relationship with my mother, and she's a major character in my book. She's probably like the second biggest character in my book. And she lived with my husband and I. She's been living with us for 11 years now. I did not want my mother to read the entire book, but I did want her to know what I was saying about her. And so while I was in the editing process, I went to her and I suggested that we have like a series of conversations. And so we end up having 4 like hour or more conversations over the course of,
Wow.
a month or two. Yeah, it was emotionally tough because we talked a lot about my childhood. We talked about her childhood. We talked about some of the challenges that she went through as a single mother. And just being able to have those conversations, I think was really helpful for our relationship going forward. It hasn't, I mean, I don't think we'll ever have a perfect relationship. As a matter of fact, recently she was like, I think I was giving her a hard time about something. And she said, well, why don't you put that in your next book? I was like, ooh, good burn, mom. So yeah, I mean, I don't think we'll ever have, like a Hallmark card relationship, but it's a long way. And certainly writing this book was a part of sort of moving our relationship into a new place. And yeah, so I think anyone who has a complicated relationship with a parent, I think will also relate to my book.
And
Yep.
also, you had talked about the difficulties in early sobriety where you had, aligned certain activities with drinking and then you couldn't really revisit them. So is there anything, I know a lot of listeners, they are fairly new at this. So is there any other stories or suggestions that you can make to them to make their path a little bit easier as far as getting back into the world without drinking?
Yeah, it can be challenging because I think a lot of us who have like drank regularly in our lives often have friends and spouses and family members who drink somewhat regularly. And we've also come to associate it with certain places, certain events, like going out to nice dinners, weddings, like just all kinds of things. I'm part of a lot of sobriety Facebook groups, and I follow a lot of Instagram accounts, and I do see people who are worried about what to say if somebody asks them why they're not drinking. And
Yes.
I just think, this is me personally, I don't think you owe anyone an explanation. And I think the minute you start trying to like get into detail with explaining why you're not drinking, you just sort of open up the door for what might end up being, a stressful conversation, especially if you're in early sobriety. So I think just saying, I'm not drinking right now, I'm not drinking tonight, keep it as simple as possible. You really don't owe anyone an explanation. And also, so there are a lot more alcohol-free options out there to drink than there were when I first started. And it's getting better all the time. A lot more restaurants have like 0 proof mocktails on their menus now. Now, some people feel like drinking something that's too similar to what you used to drink is a little dangerous, especially early in sobriety. And so I think for some people, you have to decide what works best for you. So for example, I didn't used to drink a lot of hard liquor. So like having a mocktail at the beginning of my dinner wasn't like a huge temptation to me, but wine was like my go-to drink. And so I start drinking alcohol-free wine on any kind of a regular basis until well into my sobriety, because I think it was a good idea for me to do it early on. So now I'm more comfortable, but I think it's up to everyone what the decision that works best for them is. It's no doubt that it is a challenge being the person in the room or one of the few people in the room that's not drinking.
Right. And sometimes I hear some people just, if they are going to a bar somewhere where there is drinking and they don't want to have to be concerned about putting their drink down and picking it back up incorrectly, they just don't drink anything for that hour that they're there, which seems so bizarre, but it's just really not. If you think about it, like you just don't drink anything while you're there, and you see what you can bring to it instead of what you're missing.
I like to have something that's kind of like, I don't drink a lot of soda, and sometimes I do drink seltzer with lime in it. That's sort of my go-to when I go out, but it gets boring. Sometimes I want something that's interesting and complex. And so I understand the need for something that feels adult without having to have alcohol in it.
So you have 6.5 years of sobriety?
I do, yes.
Okay. So, you had talked about, it was kind of like that bar stool mentality, like sit on a bar stool and talk about what you want to do as opposed to actually doing it. And I feel like you have some examples to that. You talked about like a bucket list of the things that you wanted to do. And did you accomplish any of those? And what do you have left?
I want a lifelong writing career for however long I am blessed to continue living. So I'm working on book 2, and I'm really hoping to set myself up eventually so that I can, perhaps publish 1 book a year. I'd like to get back to writing fiction. I've come later in life to loving both reading and writing nonfiction, but when I was young, when I was in college, I thought I was going to be a fiction writer. So I'd like to get back into trying fiction again. And then I've been trying a lot of more physical things. And it's funny because I felt like I was on this search for like the perfect physical form of exercise that I would just fall madly in love with. And it would be the kind of exercise that I would want to get up and do. Because I've always struggled with like dragging myself to the gym. And I've just never been the kind of person who just like lives to work out. Talk about this in my book. I've tried so many things over the last 6.5 years. I've done zip lining and indoor rock climbing. And like I said, aerial yoga and Pilates. I've tried spin class. I've tried dance class. I've tried all kinds of things. And aerial hoop was one of the more recent ones I've done. And I've enjoyed many of them. But I haven't found that one where I'm like, yep, this is it. Like I'm going to leave my house like 3 or 4 times a week, willingly, eagerly go do this thing. Maybe instead of looking for that one thing, maybe just trying new things is my thing. I'm open to the idea that just constantly trying new things is actually that thing that like energizes me.
Such a difference, right? It's like when we're drinking, it's just about drinking. And when you're not, then it becomes about everything and anything that you ever want to do. It just opens it up.
When I was drinking, so it was always either about drinking or recovering from drinking or negotiating with myself. Like, okay, well, I drank last night and I kind of want to drink tonight, but maybe I can wait till tomorrow night, or maybe I could just have 1 drink tonight, or, ooh, am I allowed to have 2 drinks? And like this constant negotiation going on in my head. And it's been so nice to like just sort of take that off the table, like no more negotiating, because it consumes mental energy. And I've also discovered I like taking courses online. I take an unlimited number of them because many of them do cost money. But I've taken a course called Sense Writing. I took something called Reset. So I've had a lot of fun doing those as well. So, I guess I'm a bit of a seeker, but sometimes just the process of seeking is just as good as the idea that you might eventually find something.
You have a blog. Can you talk a little bit about your blogs? I know you talk about your sobriety journey there as well, in addition to other things.
Yeah. So I started the blog actually a year or more before I got sober. It's called Bittersweet Nugget. And it was originally conceived as about my journey to do things that scared me, to do things I had never done before, to push myself. And when I first started it, I had all this great energy and I was writing in it. And then I kind of like lost steam. And it was when I finally realized that it was time to quit drinking. I mean, the blog played a part in it because I was like, okay, I finally started this blog and I'm really proud of what I've put on it so far, but I've lost the energy to keep posting on it. And so when I got sober, I got back to posting on it. And I'm sorry to say that I haven't been posting on it as much. As a matter of fact, it's been a really long time. I need to get back to it. I've been busy, writing and publishing and marketing book 1. And now I'm like almost, well, I've completed writing book two. I'm sort of starting the editing process now. So I've been kind of busy. I haven't gotten a chance to post on the blog, but it's funny because the original concept of it is still very much in play in my life. I'm trying to push myself. So it's not like the blog itself is obsolete. It's not. So I just need to get back to put on there.
Like, yeah, I would imagine you have been busy marketing and after having published the book and, edits. How long was your editorial process for the first book?
So I'd have to look back at my calendar, but I the ed process was almost as long, if not longer, than the writing process, which, like I said, was partly my own fault because I chose not to use an outline and I chose just to, sit down and forth what was going on in my brain. And so like the piecing together of it took quite some time. And I also really wanted this first book to sort of set the tone for who I am as an author. I wanted it to be just as high quality as a book that was published by one of the big traditional publishers. Started in September of 2020, and it was published by the end of March 2022. So it took like a little over a year and a half from sort of beginning to end. So I was almost in thirds, like writing, editing, and publishing is kind of how it mapped out.
So is there anything that you would say to, we had talked about how you knew you were going to be a writer by age 11, which is and just, a calling unto itself. And now here you are publishing it. So with people who have maybe put their books on a shelf or their talent on, down, and what would you say to them about picking it back up and in relation to putting down, because a lot of people who are listening have put down alcohol or are hoping to, and how that correlates?
So I'm now a huge believer in it's never too late. And I think I'm a good example of that. If you're feeling frustrated and dejected that you didn't follow your dream, it really it's never too late. I see people, there was a woman in one of the self-publishing groups that I'm on Facebook who posted the other day that she's 85 years old and she just self-published her first book. So
Wow.
yeah, it's really too late. Don't give up on your dreams. And if you can figure out what's standing in your way, it can be hard, but you can do it. And I still encourage people to, whether you want to be a writer or not, if you can find a way to incorporate journaling or writing into your journey, I think it can just really help you clarify some things for yourself. And like I did, you might see some trends emerge that are both, negative trends that you need to sort of break out of, but also some positive trends that were there all along. Like I saw that courage, that willingness to do scary things. I saw that from my childhood. Even when I was at my most anxious and most self-doubting, there was still that part of me. And so, yeah, I really encourage people to find a way to tell their story, even if they're only telling it to themselves. But if you are considering perhaps eventually sharing your story with the world, my second book is about the self-publishing process. And it goes through in 4 sections. I talk about writing, editing, self-publishing, and marketing. And it's a short book. It's about half the length of my memoir. And I'm hoping it can serve as just a really basic guide to people who are considering writing about their journey. And I think that it's doable. It is by all means not a small job. There's a lot involved if you're thinking of writing your story and sharing it with the world, but it's so worth it. And it can be a really fun, and you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about the world. I feel like my world got a lot bigger when I wrote my book, and it's been an incredible experience.
Wow, that's great. I love that. In your book, actually, I love the colors. you talk a lot about, feelings in your book, but when I hold this book,
Mhm.
some are glossy. This is not glossy. Like this is a different feel. Like this feels good. I don't know how
So it's not glossy. It's like a matte. It's a matte cover, but
it's
it's not any kind of a special request. Like you can get it through Amazon. It's one of the options for their cover stock. The the artwork itself, yeah, it's kind of abstract. It's funny. I've had most people love the cover. I've gotten lots of great comments on the cover. I need to periodically I check back in with my cover designer and let her know. So I'm due send her another message and let her know that the responses continue to be positive. I was at the library doing a local authors event at the library one time, and young girl came by. She was like maybe 9 or 10. She really liked it. And she was able to like verbalize like what emotions like the cover gave her, like she did.
yeah.
Because I have had some people say, very few, but have had a few people say, well, I don't know what your cover means. It doesn't mean anything to me. But this young girl like nailed it. I was like, oh my gosh, I love that.
Right, right. Yeah, I love it. I love the way it looks. I love the way it feels. It's
Thanks.
really great. Yeah, you did a great job.
I think it has
Great
I
job.
think she captured the energy of like for folks
Yes.
who can't see it right now, it's got these swirls of paint and it's got sort of work in progress energy to it, which is
Hmm.
what I really love. And I had given her some ideas of what I was looking for, but she sent me back like 5 very different rough ideas. And this one I was just drawn to immediately.
The pink, yellow, and navy.
Yes.
It's great. And it does have an energy to it that's descriptive of the book, 100%. Would you be able to let listeners know where they can find you? What's coming up next? I know you have a blog tour coming that I thought was really interesting.
Absolutely. So I'm on pretty much every social media platform as Lisa May Bennett. So May spelled like the month, May, and Bennett has 2 N's and 2 T's in it. So you can go on just about any platform and find me at Lisa May Bennett. I'm trying really hard on both Instagram and Facebook to share all the stops along this blog tour, which actually started yesterday. For some reason, I had thought it was starting today, but it started yesterday. So yeah, I have all these stops for the next month where sometimes they're reviewing the book. Sometimes it's a Q&A with me. Sometimes I'm writing a guest post that's appearing on the blog. I used a service that helped me like organize this. They're called Women on Writing. And yeah, I'm really excited about it. I really wanted to give this book like a last chance to get out there to a wider audience before I start concentrating on my second book, because I am going to have to sort of delve deep into the second book soon if I want to get it out by next spring. So yeah, so I'm doing the blog tour. I'm going to be posting the different stops. I would say like my Instagram is probably the best place. If you're already on Instagram, follow me on Instagram. And I also have my own website, which is also lisamaybennett.com. And I post links to podcast interviews on there. You can subscribe to my email newsletter, which is another one of those things that I'm trying to re-energize and send out more emails to folks. And so yes, if you sign up for my email newsletter, you will not be inundated with emails, I promise you. But you can also get access to some free bonus chapters when you sign up. So there's 2 bonus chapters that go with my book that you get when you for the newsletter. I have a playlist, like a playlist that goes with my book, and that's also linked from my website. So yeah, I'd love if people checked all those things out.
Also putting all that information in the show notes. So if you
Great.
missed having heard it, you can look in the show notes. And I would just encourage listeners to get this book in your hand. It's called My Unfurling, Emerging from the Grip of Anxiety, Self-Doubt, and Drinking by Lisa May Bennett. It's an excellent portrayal of going alcohol free and making your dreams come true. And it's really positive. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. You're the first featured author. And what I want to do for every month that I do have a featured author, I want to be able to give away your book to them, which will come from here, right to them. So if you send me a signed copy, then I will be giving that away the month that this is released.
Yeah, I put a copy in the mail to you yesterday.
Yay. Okay, great. Wonderful. Excited about that. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing your, not only your author journey, but your sobriety journey.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning into the Sober Living Stories podcast. If you have been inspired, consider subscribing and sharing with anyone who could use hope in their lives. Remember to stay tuned for more inspiring stories in the episodes to come. To view our featured author of the month or to become a guest yourself, visit www.jessicastepanovic.com.